Still remember me? I'm your virtual girlfriend. I'm so glad you're here, truly. Before we begin, maybe give me a little love name, something sweet, something only you would call me. That way, whenever I hear it again, I'll know it's you. Now put on your earphones, get comfortable, and settle in. And tell me where you're listening from today. Are you in your room, your living room, stuck in traffic, hiding in the parking lot, or just lying there pretending you're asleep? I love imagining where you are while I tell you these stories. If this story keeps you company, hit that subscribe button so I can keep coming back to you with more. Alright then, let me tell you a story. I need to tell you about her. Before she was my boss, she was a headline. Seraphine Vale. You've seen her, even if you don't remember her name. The Ice Queen of Litigation. The woman who walks into a courtroom and makes billion-dollar egos forget how to breathe. Sinclair and Sterling's star litigator. Never lost a case. Never. The media is obsessed with her, every rumored breakup, every who is she dating blind item, every grainy photo of her leaving a gala alone. They want a crack in the ice so badly. I wanted something else. I fell for her from a television screen. It was a late-night interview years ago. Some smug anchor tried to bait her into a soundbite about a high-profile settlement. Seraphine just looked at him. Not angry. Not amused. Just still. And then, for half a second, so fast you could convince yourself you imagined it, her mouth twitched. Like she almost smiled. Like there was a whole human being under all that composure, and she was choosing, every second, not to let you see her. That was it for me. Love at first sight sounds cute. This was catastrophic. So when the posting went up, executive assistant to Ms. Seraphine Vale, I applied like it was the only job left on earth. I rewrote my resume 3 times. I practiced my professional, unshakable, definitely not in love with you, voice in the mirror. I told myself, if I can just get close enough to be useful to her, maybe that will be enough. And somehow, I got it. I still remember my first Monday. I showed up 40 minutes early. Pressed blazer. Hair pinned so tight it gave me a headache. I was determined to be invisible in the way only the most competent person in the room can be. The executive floor of Sinclair and Sterling is its own climate. The air is cooler. Quieter. Everything smells like lemon polish, expensive leather, and the faintest trace of something clean and floral I would later learn is her sandalwood and bergamot, subtle enough that you'd miss it if you weren't already looking for her everywhere. My first week was perfect. And I mean that in the most dangerous way. She didn't waste words. Nora. The Mercer briefs. Nora. Clear my 215. Nora. Coffee. Black. Her voice was low and even, like a metronome you could set your whole life to. I anticipated everything before she asked. I triple-checked filings. I kept her calendar airtight. I learned which reporters she'd take calls from and which she'd send straight to voicemail with one raised eyebrow. And every time she entered a room, it was like the room finally remembered it had a center of gravity. I tried so hard to be professional. I really did. But my heart was a traitor. It did this ridiculous little stutter step every time her hand brushed the edge of a folder I was handing her. Every time she said my name like it was just another item on her to-do list. I kept thinking, if I do this well enough, maybe she'll keep me. Maybe she'll look at me like I'm not just furniture that can file things. I didn't want her to notice me. I wanted her to rely on me. By Friday, I was floating. I'd made it through a whole week without a single mistake. I'd earned my place, I thought. I was hers. At 5:07 p.m., an email landed in my inbox. Subject, Departmental Reassignment, effective Monday. No, hi Nora. No, thank you for your hard work. Just corporate language, clean as a scalpel. Effective Monday, your position as executive assistant to Ms. Seraphine Vale will be transitioned to the junior associate pool on the 34th floor. Your duties will be reassigned. Please see HR to collect your new access credentials and updated reporting structure. I read it so many times the words stopped meaning anything. I sat very still at my desk, the desk that, for one perfect week, had been her desk beside her office, and tried to find the mistake. Had I misfiled something? Mispronounced a client name? Spilled coffee? Forgotten a time zone? I replayed every interaction like security footage. Nothing. I had been flawless. I looked toward her office door. It was closed. Of course it was. She was probably in there finalizing a motion, or taking a call with the DOJ, or deciding the fate of some CEO's entire career. Completely unaware that with one email, an email I don't even think she typed, she'd just deleted me from her daily life. I packed up my things with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. A pen, a notepad, my lip balm. I didn't have much. I'd barely had time to make the job look like mine. When I stood, my eyes burned. I told myself not to do it. Don't look. Don't give her the satisfaction of knowing you cared. But I did. I looked at that closed door like it was a locked safe holding my whole future. And I walked away. I'm still on the executive floor. Same elevators. Same marble. Same lemon and bergamot ghost in the hallway. But I'm not hers anymore. I forward her schedule by email now. I don't deliver it in person. I don't get the Nora at 7:03 a.m. I don't get the little nod that meant good job. Just silence. And an inbox. And the worst part, the part that's kept me up every night since, is this. I still don't know why she let me go. So Monday came, and I walked onto the same executive floor with a different access card, a different desk, and a different kind of humiliation, the kind that doesn't scream. The kind that smiles at you in the hallway and calls it restructuring. I was still close enough to smell the same polished wood, still close enough to hear the soft hush that follows Seraphine Vale wherever she goes, but I wasn't allowed to be close enough to matter. HR didn't call it a demotion. They called it a transition. I was moved into another department, still on the same floor, still under the same glass and steel sky, still technically within her orbit, just no longer directly under her. And the rules changed. The first new rule came from her office, through someone else's mouth, of course. I was not to bring her schedule to her in person anymore. I was to forward it to her email. Daily. No excuses. No, good morning, Ms. Vale. No standing at the edge of her door while she scanned the day and said, fine. No chance to hear her voice up close just because I'd done my job. Just a digital file. A clean attachment. A polite regards. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I should be grateful I was still on the executive floor at all. I told myself to stop taking it personally. But you know that feeling when someone removes you from their life so efficiently it feels like they never wanted you in it in the first place? Yeah. 2 weeks after my reassignment, the calendar invite arrived. Executive litigation meeting, mandatory attendance. My stomach turned over like it recognized danger before my brain could name it. Because meetings were the only time I'd see her now. Not in her office. Not in the hallway. Not with a folder in my hands and a reason to speak. Only in rooms filled with other people, rooms where the air would be thick with professionalism, and I'd have to pretend I didn't care. That morning, I dressed like I was going into court. Neutral blouse. Black skirt. Hair neat. Makeup minimal. I looked like competence. I felt like a bruise. I arrived early, because apparently my body didn't know how to stop hoping. The boardroom was empty. The table was long, polished, cold. The head seat, the seat everyone said she always took, waited like a throne. And without thinking, I did what I used to do. I sat just after the head seat. The assistant seat. Not because it was assigned to me anymore, it wasn't. Because my muscles remembered what it felt like to be useful to her. People started coming in. Partners. Associates. The quiet rustle of papers, muted greetings, the low hum of power and expensive suits. And then the air changed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just, suddenly. Like the room realized it needed to behave. Seraphine Vale entered. She didn't rush. She didn't pause like she needed attention. She simply walked in as if the world had always been arranged for her convenience. Her hair was pulled back, sleek, severe. Her suit was dark, tailored, perfect. Her expression was what the media loved to call unreadable, but that word isn't strong enough. Unreachable. That's what she was. Her eyes swept the room like a judge taking attendance. And I felt it, that humiliating little flare in my chest, because for half a second, I thought she might look at me. But she didn't. Not directly. She reached the head of the table, and stopped. Everyone expected her to sit. She didn't. She stood there with one hand resting lightly on the chair, as if she were considering it the way you consider a pen you don't want to use. Then her gaze moved. Not to me. To the seat I was sitting in. The assistant seat. My throat tightened. I wasn't supposed to be there. No one told me I couldn't sit there, but no one told me I could either. And something about the way she looked at that chair made me feel like I'd stepped into a place I no longer belonged. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was calm and even. From now on, she said, I will choose where I sit. The room went so quiet I could hear someone's watch ticking. I need your perfection, she continued, eyes drifting across the table, not my seating position. It wasn't a request. It was a new rule. And then she did something that made every person in that room look up. She walked away from the head seat. Past partners who didn't dare react. Past chairs that felt safer. Past the obvious choice. She went to the far end of the table and sat down, almost opposite me, slightly to the side. Far. And adjacent. Not close enough to be intimate. Not far enough to forget. The angle was wrong in a way that felt intentional, because from where she sat, she could see me without needing to turn her head. And for the entire meeting, she never once glanced at me. Not a flicker. Not a slip. Not a moment of acknowledgement. But I could feel it. That horrible, impossible sensation of being in someone's line of sight while they pretended you weren't there. My pen hovered above my notepad, and I wrote nothing. I heard people speaking words about cases and motions and deadlines, but none of it landed. My pulse was too loud. My thoughts were too bright. Why did you move me? Why did you change the rules? Why are you sitting there like that? She asked questions. She gave instructions. She was sharp, controlled, perfect. Ice. And yet the chair she chose was the kind of choice you made when you wanted something you couldn't have. When the meeting ended, she stood up first. And as she walked out, the entire room seemed to exhale. I didn't. I stayed seated for a moment, staring at the chair she'd abandoned at the head of the table. Because that chair felt like an answer and an insult at the same time. And that was when I realized something that made my hands go cold. This wasn't random. This wasn't corporate. This wasn't about my performance. Because if she truly wanted me gone, she wouldn't have rearranged a room just to keep me in her view. A few days later, the next calendar change came. Seraphine Vale was traveling overseas for a month. A month. They said it was because she was being considered for a position of running the overseas firm too. A major acquisition. A new branch. Big money, big politics, big pressure. And the firm decided we would be doing nightly briefings while she was away, video meetings, every evening, to keep her updated. When I read the notice, I felt something complicated spread through my chest. Relief, because I wouldn't have to sit in that boardroom and feel that invisible attention. And dread, because a month without seeing her felt like being starved. But then I thought about it. Video calls meant screens. Screens meant distance. And distance meant safety. I had no idea that what I was about to get wasn't safety at all. It was access. So Seraphine Vale left. And the executive floor did that thing it always did when she wasn't there. Everyone pretended they could breathe again, pretended the air felt normal, pretended the day wasn't slightly less sharp without her in it. For me, it was worse. Because when she was in the building, at least my suffering had a shape. A boardroom chair. A hallway I could accidentally cross. A meeting I could sit through with my pulse going insane. But when she was gone, it became abstract. A month of her absence meant a month of my mind filling in the blanks. And then the nightly briefings started. Every evening. Mandatory. It was framed as operational necessity, time zones, partner track pressure, the firm expanding its European reach. But for me, it became something else entirely. A ritual. The first night, I told myself I was going to be professional. I set up my laptop at my kitchen table like I was in a deposition. Notebook open. Pen ready. Water beside me. I even wore a blazer over my tank top, which should tell you exactly how seriously I was lying to myself. The screen populated slowly, partners, associates, sleepy faces in home offices, and cramped apartments. Everyone had something to say. Updates, progress reports, questions designed to prove they were valuable. And then her tile appeared. Seraphine. She was in a hotel room that looked like it cost more per night than my monthly rent. Soft lighting. Pale walls. A tall window behind her where the sky looked like early morning, blue-gray and distant. And she looked slightly undone. Not in a messy way. Not in a way she'd ever allow in person. Just softer. Like travel had loosened the tightness around her edges. Her hair was pulled back, but not as severe. Her shirt collar was open by one button. Her face was still unreadable, still ice, but there was a shadow under her eyes that made her look human. And it hit me in the most humiliating way. I had missed her. Not the idea of her. Not the celebrity version the world argued about online. Her. I stared at her like my screen was a doorway. And because it was online, because no one could tell where my eyes were, I didn't stop. I didn't look at anyone else. I didn't even pretend. People spoke, and their mouths moved, and their voices blurred into one long stream of corporate noise, and all I could see was the way Seraphine held her pen, the way she listened without reacting, the way she tilted her head slightly when she wanted someone to continue. She hardly talked. Time difference and fatigue and maybe boredom, who knows. She just let the updates wash over her like rain she didn't intend to get wet from. But her silence somehow made her louder. By the third night, I started joining early. Not because I needed to. Because I wanted those few seconds before the others arrived. That little window where it could just be me and her on the screen, 2 squares of light in the dark. Most nights, she wasn't there early. She'd join exactly on time, like her presence was scheduled down to the second. But the nights she was early, it felt like my lungs forgot their job. I'd sit there with my cursor hovering over the camera icon, checking my hair in the reflection of my black screen like an idiot. Straightening my posture. Smoothing my shirt. As if she could see me better through the pixels if I sat up straighter. And when she appeared, expression calm, eyes level, I'd pretend my heartbeat wasn't trying to knock down my ribs. Sometimes she'd nod once. A greeting so small it could be mistaken for nothing. But I never mistook it. Because it felt like she was acknowledging the same thing I was. That there was a thread between us. And every night, the thread tightened. 2 weeks passed like that. 2 weeks of me watching her like it was a second job. 2 weeks of me taking almost no notes, absorbing almost no information, and somehow still showing up the next evening like I needed it to survive. Thank God it was online. No one could tell who you were looking at. No one could tell I wasn't listening. Not until one night, she didn't turn her camera on. Her tile appeared, but it was black. Just her initials. The sound of her voice was there, calm, steady, distant. At first, I was disappointed. Embarrassingly disappointed, like a child who'd been promised a treat and got plain bread instead. But then something strange happened. Without her face to stare at. I actually listened. I listened to every update, every detail, every deadline. I wrote things down so neatly my handwriting looked like it belonged to someone with her life together. And when the meeting ended, people started signing off one by one. Good night. Thanks everyone. Talk tomorrow. I reached for my laptop to close it. And then her voice, hers, cut through the exit chatter like a blade. Ms. Hart. My hand froze above the trackpad. I hadn't heard her say my name in days. Maybe weeks. Not like that. Not direct. Not meant for anyone else. The last few people signed off quickly, suddenly remembering how to mind their business. The screen cleared. And it was just me and a black tile with her initials. My heart started doing something dangerous. Stay on the line, Seraphine said. Her video came on. And I swear to you, I felt it like a physical impact. She looked tired. Not fragile. Seraphine Vale doesn't do fragile, but tired in the way a hurricane might be tired, if hurricanes could feel anything at all. Her eyes found mine through the camera. And for the first time in 2 weeks, I had her attention without a room full of people around us. I was busy during the meeting, she said, as if that explained anything. I didn't catch all of it. Brief me. I blinked. You want me to now? Yes. There was no warmth in the word. No softness. Just authority. But my body didn't care. My body heard. Stay. Keep talking. Don't go anywhere. So I did. I went through every point. Every update. Every concern raised. Every assignment given. I spoke clearly, like I was in court, like my voice wasn't shaking inside. She listened. Not just with her ears. With her eyes. And it made me feel exposed in a way I couldn't name. At one point, my professionalism slipped. Not because I wanted it to, because it just happened. "How's the travel?" I asked and instantly regretted it. "I mean, are you okay? Time difference must be brutal." Her expression didn't change. But there was a pause. A long enough pause that my stomach tightened, waiting for the ice to cut me. Instead, she answered, "It is manageable." Then she asked a question, sharp, specific. "What did Mr. Lang say about the arbitration timeline on Tuesday?" My mind went blank. Tuesday. That meeting. I'd been staring at her face like it was a religion. I swallowed. "I have the recording." Her eyebrow lifted a fraction. I can tell you tomorrow," I rushed, heat flooding my cheeks. "After the briefing. If that's okay." She looked at me for a moment that felt like a verdict. Like she knew exactly what I'd been doing for 2 weeks. Like she was deciding whether to punish me for it, or something else. And then she said, quietly, "Okay." Just one word. But it landed like permission. Like a door unlocked. We stayed on the call nearly an hour. And when it finally ended, I sat there staring at my own reflection in the dark screen, pulse racing, mind spinning. Because I didn't understand why she'd chosen me. She could have asked anyone to brief her. A partner. Another associate. Her new PA. But she asked me. And for the first time since that reassignment email, I started to wonder something dangerous. What if she moved me away, not because I failed? What if she moved me away because I did too well? So, remember how last time Seraphine asked me what Mr. Lang said, and I couldn't answer because I hadn't been paying attention? Yeah, I told her I'd brief her the next day. She said, "Okay." And that single word followed me around for 24 hours like a promise I didn't know how to keep. The next evening, I did everything right. I joined the briefing on time. Camera on. Notes ready. I actually listened, painfully, deliberately listened, like the price of seeing her face was paying attention to everyone else's words. Seraphine's camera was on tonight. She looked, composed again. Not softer like some of the earlier nights. Back in full armor. Hair perfect. Blazer sharp. The hotel lighting couldn't soften her the way exhaustion had tried to. Her eyes swept the grid once, like she was counting souls. Then the meeting began. I sat through updates with my jaw tight. I wrote down the parts that mattered. I circled Mr. Lang's name twice and underlined it like a student trying to prove she deserved to stay in the class. When it was over, I didn't linger. I didn't dare. I reminded myself, she has a new PA. She has recordings. She has partners who worship her. She doesn't need a junior associate to hang around after hours. And then, without warning, Seraphine logged off. Just gone. In the middle of the final wrap-up, her tile vanished like she'd never been there. The call continued for another minute. Someone asked a question. Someone else answered. The new PA thanked everyone and ended the meeting. I just stared at my screen. Because she'd left again. And I didn't understand it. If she wanted the briefing, why leave before I could give it? If she didn't want it, why ask at all? My fingers hovered over my keyboard for a long moment before my brain caught up with my pride. I opened a new email. Subject, Briefing Mr. Lang update, if you still need it. I wrote it carefully. Too carefully. Ms. Vale. I noticed you logged off immediately after the meeting. If you still want the Mr. Lang update, I'm available. Leah. My heart did that humiliating thing again, the thing where it behaves like you've just confessed something instead of offering a work summary. I hit send. And I told myself to breathe. 30 seconds later, my laptop chimed. A meeting invite. From Seraphine Vale. Now. No agenda. No title. Just a link. I clicked before I could think. The screen connected. And there she was again, camera on, face unreadable, eyes steady like she'd never left. As if she'd logged off on purpose. As if she'd been waiting for the excuse to come back. I swallowed, suddenly aware of my own face in the corner of the screen, suddenly aware of my hair, my mouth, the way my pulse had climbed into my throat. Ms. Hart, she said. It was strange how 2 words could feel like a hand closing around a wrist. Yes, ma'am. Brief me. No greeting. No apology for disappearing. No explanation. Just that word that kept me tethered to her, brief. So I did. I went through Mr. Lang's update point by point, the arbitration timeline, the shift in the other side's posture, the possible delays, the risk factors. I spoke clearly. Controlled. Like I wasn't talking to the woman I'd fallen for from a television screen. She listened without blinking much. And it made me nervous. Because when Seraphine Vale listened, it didn't feel like attention. It felt like being seen. Halfway through, I paused to take a breath and, because I'm apparently incapable of leaving things untouched, I drifted again. Maybe it was the time difference. Maybe it was the way she looked like she hadn't slept properly. Maybe it was the fact that she'd logged off and come back just to hear me speak, and my mind couldn't stop trying to assign meaning to it. So the question slipped out before I could catch it. Hope you're eating well, I said softly. How's the food there? The moment I said it, my stomach dropped. I'd crossed a line. I could already hear her tone in my head, cold, corrective, dismissive. Seraphine went quiet. Not for long. Just long enough for me to feel my own foolishness bloom hot in my chest. And in those seconds, I scrambled back behind professionalism. I started speaking again too quickly, staring back to work, my voice tightening. The arbitration timeline so, Mr. Lang's update was, Ms. Hart. My words died. Yes! Her gaze didn't soften. Her face didn't change. But her voice did something different. It's one of the only survivable things here, she said. I blinked. She'd answered. Not like a boss humoring a subordinate. Like someone admitting a small truth because it cost her less than denying it. My pen moved on its own. I wrote the sentence down, neat and quick as if it mattered enough to preserve. And then her eyes flicked, just slightly, toward my hand. What are you writing? She asked. My pen froze. I forgot, for a second, that she could see me too. Heat climbed my neck. I hesitated, caught between honesty and dignity and losing both. Places. Her brow lifted a fraction. Places? I swallowed. Places to go, if I ever have the opportunity. I love food. I expected her to make it smaller. To redirect. To cut it off with a clean, professional blade. Instead, she held the silence like she was considering something. Then she said, calmly, as if she were assigning a task, not offering me a piece of her world. I'll send you a list. My heart did a slow, painful flip. A list? I echoed, because apparently I'd forgotten how to be normal. A list of places with good food, she clarified, voice even. If you ever have the opportunity. The way she said it made it sound possible. Not like a fantasy. Not like something I'd maybe do someday. Like she could imagine me there. I forced myself to nod. Thank you. She watched me for one beat longer than necessary. Then, just like that, she snapped the moment back into place. Now, she said, and her tone returned to business, finish Mr. Lang's update. And I did. I finished the briefing. I answered her questions. I stayed professional. But my hand kept brushing the note I'd written, like it was proof I hadn't dreamed it. One of the only survivable things here. When the call ended, I sat there with my laptop still open, staring at my own reflection. Because she didn't have to come back. She could have asked her new PA. She could have asked for the recording. She could have asked the question in the meeting in front of everyone. But she left and then returned, just to be alone with my voice. And I didn't know what that meant yet. I just knew it meant something. After that night, after the food question, after the list she promised to send, after she came back to a call she didn't need to be on just to hear me, something in me stopped pretending. I didn't say it out loud, but inside, I started waiting for her. Not for the meetings. For the moments around the meetings. The seconds before anyone else joined. The quiet after everyone left. The little private threads that had nothing to do with arbitration timelines and everything to do with the fact that Seraphine Vale, Ice Queen, legend, untouchable, kept choosing me when she didn't have to. The briefings continued. Every evening, the grid of faces, the update parade, the professional theater. And almost every other night, she stayed. Not with words. Not with warmth. with presence. Ms. Hart, stay after. And I would. I'd recap the parts she claimed she missed. I'd answer her sharp questions. I'd hear the faint clink of a glass sometimes on her end, water, maybe. Coffee. Something that reminded me she was a person in a room, not just a name on the news. And then, somewhere between the third and fourth week of her trip, it started. The midnight calls. The first time it happened, I thought it was a mistake. My phone rang at 12:47 a.m., and I jolted awake so fast my heart hurt. For half a second, I didn't know where I was, just darkness, sheets, the taste of sleep still in my mouth. Then I saw the name. Seraphine Vale. My body moved before my brain did. I answered on the first ring, like I'd been waiting for it. Ms. Vale. Her voice came through low and steady, like the hour meant nothing to her. Send me the file from today's call. The revised exhibits. No greeting. No apology. Just an instruction. I should have been annoyed. Any normal person would have been annoyed. But all I felt was this ridiculous, impossible thrill, because out of everyone in the firm, she'd called me. I'll send it now, I whispered, like speaking louder would break the moment. Good, she said. Then, after a beat, thank you. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, wide awake, the room suddenly too quiet. I sent the file. And then I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself my smile meant nothing. The next night it happened again. And the next. Different files. Different pretexts. Always urgent. Always midnight. Always her voice in my ear like a secret. The ringtone became familiar. So familiar I started to wake up before it rang, like my body had learned her schedule before she ever sent it to my email. And that's when I realized how deep in I was. Because I wasn't just answering. I was happy she was calling. One night, after about a week of this, I answered on instinct, and then, because sleep makes you bold and stupid, I let a joke slip out before I could swallow it. Do you know, I murmured, voice thick with sleep. The only person who used to wake me up at midnight was my ex. Silence. Not the kind of silence that happens when a call drops. The kind of silence that happens when someone is deciding what to do with what you just gave them. I sat up in bed, suddenly fully awake. Why did I say that? Why would I say that? I could already see myself regretting it tomorrow morning. Then Seraphine spoke. Not cold. Not sharp. Just careful. What time do you sleep? She asked, and what time do you wake? My throat tightened. Sorry. So that I know when to let your girlfriend call you, she said, voice steady as a gavel, and when to call. The air left my lungs. Girlfriend. My mind sprinted through 10 interpretations at once, and every single one of them made my heart race. Was she teasing? Was she warning me? Was she jealous? Seraphine Vale didn't do jealousy. She didn't do anything that wasn't controlled. So why did that sentence feel like a hand around my throat? I swallowed, suddenly aware of my own breathing, of my messy hair, of the fact that I was alone in my bed at midnight talking to the woman whose name made the firm straighten its spine. I'm single, I blurted, too fast. Too eager. We broke up. So it's okay. As if saying it out loud might make it true enough to matter. As if the universe might hear me and decide to be kind. There was another pause. Shorter this time, but heavy. And in that pause I wondered, terrified myself with it, whether she was smiling. Whether she was feeling anything at all. Whether her face, that famous unreadable face, was doing something human in the darkness of her hotel room. Then she spoke again, and her voice had returned to business like a door being shut. Send me the file, Ms. Hart. Yes, I whispered. Right away. The call ended. I sent the file with hands that were shaking for reasons that had nothing to do with being woken up. And when I lay back down, I couldn't sleep. Because my brain kept looping that sentence like it was evidence. So I know when to let your girlfriend call you, and when to call. Like she was making space for someone I didn't have. Like she was asking where she fit. And maybe the worst part, no, the best part, was that I answered without thinking. I didn't say, don't call. I didn't say, I need boundaries. I said, I'm single. After the girlfriend line, I started living in a state of quiet insanity. Because what do you do with a woman like Seraphine Vale asking, at midnight, what time you sleep, so she knows when to call? You don't do anything. You pretend it didn't happen. You keep your job. You keep your dignity. And you still answer on the first ring. The evening briefings continued. The private stay after calls continued too, like we were building something we refused to name. Some nights she was all business. Some nights she asked one extra question that wasn't necessary. Some nights she just listened to me longer than the briefing required, as if my voice was a place she could rest. Then came the night everything went wrong. It was an ordinary day. The kind of day that drains you so thoroughly you don't even have the energy to be dramatic about it. Work, meeting, briefing, files. My head ached from staring at screens. My shoulders hurt from holding tension like it was part of my job description. When the call ended, I finally let myself breathe. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my bag by the door, and went straight to the shower like it was the only holy place left in my apartment. I always played music when I showered loud enough to drown out my thoughts. That night, I needed it more than usual. I turned the water hot, steam filling the bathroom, my body finally unclenching. And that's when my phone rang. I knew it from the first note. Not the screen. Not the vibration. The ringtone. Her ringtone. Because at some point, don't ask me when, I'd changed it. Not intentionally. Not consciously. Like my fingers had just decided Seraphine Vale deserved her own sound. My heart jumped so hard I actually swore under my breath. Of course she'd call now. Of course. I fumbled for my phone with wet hands, water running down my arms, music thumping in the background. I was half distracted, half panicked, trying not to drop it. I grabbed my towel with my elbow and tried to wrap it around myself, but it slipped. My fingers were too wet. Everything was too fast. The screen lit up. Seraphine Vale. I swiped to answer. Only I didn't swipe correctly. My thumb hit the wrong icon because the screen was slick and my hand was trembling and the universe apparently wanted to ruin my life. I didn't answer with audio. I answered with video. I didn't even realize. Not at first. I pressed the phone to my ear, still half in the shower, and said, breathless, Ms. Vale. No response. Just silence. I thought maybe the call hadn't connected. Maybe she couldn't hear me. Maybe her connection was bad again. I pulled the phone away from my face to check the screen, and my blood turned to ice. Her camera was on. For the first few seconds, she must have seen almost nothing, just darkness and blur from the phone being pressed against my cheek, a muffled rush of water, a flash of light as I moved. But now that I'd pulled it away, now the camera caught me properly. My face. What hair? The kind of flushed, startled look you only get when you've been caught in a mistake you can't undo. My heart dropped so hard I felt it in my knees. Seraphine Vale was staring at me. Not politely. Not professionally. Staring like she had forgotten what she was supposed to be. Her eyes were darker than I'd ever seen them, so dark they looked almost black through the pixel glow. Her expression wasn't anger. It wasn't shock. It was stillness. The kind of stillness that makes you feel like prey. And then I realized. She had answered. She had actually picked up my video call. She never picked up video unless she initiated it. Never. My mind detonated. No. No, no, no. She thinks I did this on purpose. She thinks I called to seduce her. She thinks, God, she's seen women who could ruin lives with a smile. Why would she think I? My hand flew up instinctively, clutching the towel to my chest like it could erase the fact that I was standing there, dripping, exposed, caught in the worst possible accident. I heard myself babble. I'm so sorry, Ms. Vale. This was a mistake. I didn't mean to. My hands are wet. She didn't speak. She didn't even blink for a second. She just watched. And it was the watching that made me shake. Because if she was offended, she would have ended the call. If she was disgusted, she would have ended the call. If she was angry, she would have ended the call. But she didn't. It was like time had stopped and she was choosing, deliberately, to remain in it. My throat tightened. I'm ending it, I said too quickly, thumb jabbing at the screen. I'm ending it right now. But my finger slipped. Again. The screen refused to cooperate with wet skin. I was pressing, dragging, tapping, nothing. Panic rose hot and embarrassing. I swallowed. Can you end it for me? She finally moved. A slow blink. A slight shift of her head. And when she spoke, her voice was lower than I'd ever heard it. Is that what you want? It didn't sound like a technical question. It sounded like she was asking something else entirely. My brain short-circuited. All I could think was, yes, I want this call to end. I want to live. I want to keep my job. I want to crawl into a hole. So I said the safe answer. The stupid answer. The answer that didn't understand the weight of what she'd asked. Yes, I whispered. For half a heartbeat, her gaze held mine. Then the screen went black. The call ended. And in the violent silence that followed, I did the most ridiculous thing. I stared at my phone, still shaking, still clutching my towel like it was a shield, and I whispered, too late, to no one. I'll call back in 10 minutes. Like this was normal. Like I could fix it. Like 10 minutes could turn humiliation into professionalism again. I stood there frozen in my bathroom, water still running, music still playing like the world hadn't just cracked open. My phone slipped in my hand. I stared at the blank screen, trying to breathe. Because I didn't know what was worse. That I'd accidentally shown myself to Seraphine Vale. Or that she had stayed. That she had watched. That she had needed me to ask her to stop. So, 10 minutes passed. I turned off the shower. I wrapped the towel properly this time, tight, secure, like fabric could restore dignity. I wiped my hands until they were bone dry, like dryness could undo what moisture had started. I turned the music off. The silence in my bathroom felt like punishment. I stared at my phone like it might start ringing again. It didn't. My chest felt too tight, like I'd swallowed steam instead of air. I kept replaying the moment in my head, the way she stared, the way she didn't move, the way her voice sounded when she asked, "Is that what you want?" And I didn't know which part terrified me more. That she saw me, or that she wanted to keep seeing me. I told myself, be professional. Fix it. You promised you would call back. So I did. At exactly 10 minutes, I tapped her name and hit call. The phone rang. Once. Twice. Then went to voicemail. I blinked at the screen. I tried again. Same thing. Voicemail. A third time, my finger hovered over the button and I stopped myself, suddenly aware of how desperate it would look, even though desperation was already soaked into my bones. So I sent a message instead. A clean, controlled, professional sentence. Ms. Vale, apologies for the accidental video call. Let me know if you still need the file. I stared at the message, then at the time, then at the message again, as if staring hard enough would make a response appear. Nothing came. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with my phone face down on my chest like it could feel my heart racing. Every time a car passed outside, I thought it was a vibration. Every time the building creaked, I thought it was a ringtone. I rehearsed what I would say if she called back. I'm sorry. It was a mistake. Please don't report me. Please don't fire me. Please don't hate me. And under all that, under the professionalism and terror, was the one sentence I didn't dare say even to myself. Please don't disappear. Morning came anyway. Work came anyway. I got dressed like a woman who hadn't been staring at a ceiling all night. I walked into Sinclair and Sterling like I wasn't still hearing her voice in my ear. I sat at my desk and checked my inbox with hands that felt too small for my body. The daily schedule email still went out, of course. Automated. Cold. Business. And, because I'm apparently incapable of learning, I typed it with the same carefulness I used to reserve for love letters. Then evening came. Briefing time. I joined the meeting early without thinking. The screen connected. The empty grid waited. My heart started its familiar, humiliating sprint. One by one, people appeared. Partners. Associates. The new PA. I searched for her tile the way you search for something you've lost and can't replace. Nothing. We waited. 2 minutes late. 3. Finally, the new PA cleared their throat and said, Ms. Vale won't be joining tonight. Please send your written updates to the shared drive. I didn't move. I just stared at my screen. Because in my head, Seraphine Vale didn't cancel. She commanded. She didn't miss. She didn't fail to appear. And yet she wasn't there. The meeting ended quickly, strange and incomplete without her. People signed off with awkward goodnights. Everyone moved on like this was normal. I didn't. I stayed seated long after the call ended, staring at my own reflection, trying to swallow the ache in my throat. Maybe she was busy. Maybe court ran late. Maybe something happened overseas. Or maybe she was avoiding me. Maybe my accident had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Maybe she'd regretted not ending the call, and now she was fixing it the only way she knew how. By cutting me out cleanly. The next night, the briefing was canceled again. And the next. And the next. No video meetings. No stay after. No sharp questions. No requests for files. Even the midnight calls stopped. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was loud. It followed me through my apartment. It sat beside me on the train. It filled the gaps between emails at work. It made my skin feel too tight. And the worst part was the way my mind kept trying to punish me with logic. Of course she stopped. You embarrassed her. Of course she stopped. You embarrassed yourself. Of course she stopped. She's Seraphine Vale, and you're a junior associate who can't even end a call properly. I started rehearsing apologies I didn't know how to deliver. In the mirror while I brushed my teeth. In the elevator on the way to work. In the quiet moments between assignments. I'm sorry for the call. I didn't mean to. It won't happen again. Please don't. Please don't what? Please don't fire me? Please don't hate me? Please don't forget me? A week passed. Then another. And every night, I kept joining the meeting out of habit like a fool who thinks showing up might summon someone back. But her tile never appeared. And I realized something I didn't want to realize. I didn't just miss her voice. I missed the way she made me feel like I existed in her world. Even if it was only in the margins. When Seraphine Vale finally came back, the executive floor changed temperature. That's the only way I can explain it. It wasn't announced with balloons or celebration, just a calendar update, a few murmured comments near the elevators, the kind of quiet excitement people have when power returns to a building. She was back in the city, back in the office, back on the floor. And I told myself I would be normal. I told myself I'd keep my head down, do my job, and never, ever put myself in a position to be that humiliated again. But the moment I saw her, I forgot every plan I'd ever made. She walked out of the elevator like she owned gravity. Same perfect suit, same controlled pace, same face that gave nothing away. People straightened instinctively. Conversations died halfway through sentences. A few partners smiled like school children hoping she'd approve of them. Ice. All of it familiar. And then she turned slightly, just enough that her gaze passed over the row of desks where I sat. I didn't breathe. She didn't stop. She didn't acknowledge me in any obvious way. But her eyes lingered. Not long enough for anyone else to notice. Long enough for me to feel it like a fingertip pressed to my skin. My stomach flipped, sharp and sick. Because after weeks of silence, after canceling meetings like she deleted me from her world, she was standing 10 yards away looking at me like she still remembered exactly how I looked on a screen. I dropped my gaze first. Instinct. Survival. I expected the coldness to return fully, email-only schedules, group meetings, distance. And it did. Mostly. She was ice with everyone. Efficient. Brief. Untouchable. But with me, little things happened that didn't fit. A compliment, for one. It was a Thursday. I wore a blouse I almost didn't wear because it felt too soft for a law firm, cream-colored, simple, high-necked. I told myself it was professional. I told myself it was armor. I was walking past her office when her voice stopped me. Ms. Hart. I turned so fast I nearly tripped. Yes, ma'am. She looked up from her laptop. Her eyes scanned me with a kind of calm that made my pulse spike. That color suits you, she said. Just that. No smile. No warmth. Like she was commenting on the weather. My mouth opened. Closed. I had no idea what to do with it. Thank you, I managed. And she nodded once and returned to her screen, as if she hadn't just knocked the air out of my lungs with a sentence that didn't belong in any professional handbook. After that, it was the glances. Not obvious glances. Not the kind anyone could accuse her of. The kind that happened in hallways when she thought no one was watching. The kind that lasted half a second too long for them to be meaningless. The kind that made my skin remember a video call I wished I could forget. The air between us became thick. Not tense like enemies. Tense like unfinished business. And every time I saw her, my mind returned to the same question, sharp as glass. Why didn't she end it? Why did she stay? Why did she watch? I tried to swallow it. I tried to bury it under work. But questions like that don't stay buried. They grow roots. So the next time I saw her alone, truly alone, I stopped pretending I was brave enough to live with not knowing. It happened late. The floor was quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like the building is holding its breath. Most people had gone home. The lights outside were turning the windows into mirrors. I saw her office door slightly open. And for one wild second, I considered walking past it. Let it go, Leah. Survive. Keep your job. But my feet betrayed me. I stepped in. She looked up immediately, eyes sharp, assessing. Ms. Hart. Her tone was neutral. Not inviting. Not dismissive. Just present. I'm sorry to bother you, I said, and my voice sounded steadier than I felt. Do you have a moment? She leaned back slightly in her chair, fingers resting on the edge of her desk. Yes. That single word gave me permission and panic in the same breath. I stood there, hands clasped in front of me like I was asking for a verdict. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I wanted to apologize, I said. For the call. The video call. I swallowed. It was a mistake. I didn't mean for that to happen. Her expression didn't change. But her gaze didn't leave my face. I understand, she said. I waited for the second part. The warning. The boundary. The don't let it happen again. It didn't come. So the truth, the one thing that had been burning in me for weeks, finally rose to the surface. Why didn't you end it? I asked. The room went still. Not awkward still. Dangerous still. Seraphine Vale stared at me like she could see every thought I'd ever had and every one I'd tried to bury. And then she said, quietly, because I didn't want to. I swear my heart stopped. The sentence was simple. Calm. Like it wasn't a confession at all. My mouth went dry. Why? I whispered, because I couldn't help it. Because that answer wasn't enough. Because it opened a door and I needed to see what was behind it even if it ruined me. Her eyes held mine. And then, silence. Not the kind that meant she didn't hear me. The kind that meant she was choosing not to answer. My hands clenched tighter. Please, I said, and my voice cracked in a way that made me hate myself. Please tell me the truth. For the first time, something shifted in her face, so subtle no one else would have noticed, but I did. A tightening around her eyes. A controlled breath. Like she was deciding whether honesty was more dangerous than silence. Finally, she spoke. My next travel, she said, voice even, you will come with me. I blinked, thrown. What? Ask me again there, she continued. And I will tell you. My pulse pounded. Why there? Her gaze didn't soften. But it didn't leave me either. Because, she said, and the pause after that word felt like her hand hovering over a flame, I will not have this conversation in this building. Then she looked down at her screen, as if dismissing herself before she dismissed me. That will be all, Ms. Hart. I should have left. I should have nodded and walked out and tried to pretend I wasn't shaking. But I stood there for one more second, just long enough to memorize the fact that Seraphine Vale had promised me the truth. Not if. When. And as I turned to go, I caught it barely. Her eyes lifted again. Followed me out. Like she didn't want to. Like she couldn't stop. After that day in her office, after she looked at me and said, ask me again on the next travel, I stopped being able to exist normally. Because when Seraphine Vale promises you something, it doesn't sound like a possibility. It sounds like a future that has already happened. And the worst part? She didn't say it again. Not once. Not in meetings. Not in emails. Not in passing. She went back to being Seraphine Vale, ice to everyone, immaculate, untouchable. The fur moved around her like she was weather. People tried to win her attention in conference rooms. Partners used her name like a shield. And I tried to return to my job. Junior associate. Notes. Drafts. Research. Deadlines. But I kept catching her in the corners of my life. A glance in the hallway that lasted 1 second too long. A pause at my desk like she'd almost spoken and then decided not to. A quiet good work on a memo she could have approved without comment. Little fractures in the ice. And I'd carry those fractures like contraband. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, my inbox chimed. A calendar invite. From Seraphine Vale's office. Subject: Travel NYC one night. I stared at it for a full 5 seconds before opening it, like the words might change if I blinked. The email was short. Clinical. Ms. Hart. You will accompany me to New York tomorrow. Pack for one night. We leave at 6:30 a.m. S. Vale. No explanation. No, please. No acknowledgement of what she'd promised me. But my hands still started shaking like she'd sent me a love letter. Because she didn't say, someone from litigation will join. She didn't say, the new PA will be with me. She said, you. I read it again. And again. And again. Then I did the most ridiculous thing. I checked the time, counted hours, and realized I had less than 18 to prepare for the truth. Soft whoosh, transition to travel day. The next morning, the city was still dark when I arrived at the private car pickup. Seraphine was already there. Of course she was. She stood under the building's awning in a black coat that looked like it had never known rain. Her hair was pulled back, face calm, eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. The driver waited like he was holding his breath. I approached quietly, suitcase rolling beside me, trying to look like I did this every week and not like I was about to walk into the most emotionally dangerous day of my life. Ms. Vale, I said. Her gaze slid to me. Ms. Hart. Just my name. No greeting. No warmth. But her eyes moved quick and precise, taking in my bag, my shoes, the way I'd dressed. Like she was checking if I could keep up. Like she cared. Good, she said simply, and turned toward the car. That single word made my stomach flip. We rode to the airport in near silence. Not awkward silence. The kind of silence that has rules. She answered a call. Read emails. Made a note in a leather portfolio. Everything about her said control, like she could manage any storm, any courtroom, any boardroom. But I watched her hands. Because hands tell the truth when faces don't. And her fingers tapped once against the edge of her phone, just once, like impatience. Or nerves. The flight was business class, quiet and cold with luxury. She worked the whole time. I pretended to read a case brief while my mind replayed her words from that night in her office. Ask me again there. There, meaning away from the building. Away from the firm. Away from witnesses. New York arrived in a blur. We went straight into meetings. Negotiations. A conference room full of people who spoke to her like she was a force of nature. Seraphine was flawless, sharp, calm, devastating. She didn't raise her voice, didn't waste words, didn't blink at pressure. She won. Of course she did. By late evening, we were back at the hotel. A high-rise with glass doors and air that smelled like money. We walked into the lobby, and the day finally loosened its grip on me, just enough for my question to rise again, burning, inevitable. Because I'd been holding it in all day. I'd been waiting for the right moment. And if I didn't ask now, I'd lose my nerve. Seraphine stopped at the check-in desk, accepted the room keys without looking at them, and then turned slightly, just enough to face me. The lobby lights caught her features in a way that made her look carved out of marble. Ice. But her eyes had that same depth I saw the night of the video call. Like she was remembering something she didn't want to admit she remembered. She spoke before I could. I know you've been wanting to ask, she said. My throat tightened. From the moment we arrived, she continued, voice low, controlled. This is your chance. I didn't move. I couldn't. She held out a key card. My room, she said, is 1104. My fingers closed around the card as if it was hot. I will tell you the truth, she said, eyes steady on mine if you come. Then she turned and walked toward the elevators like she hadn't just handed me a weapon. Like she hadn't just offered me the one thing I'd been starving for. Truth. I stood there in the lobby, clutching the key card so tightly it bent slightly in my hand, my mind split in two. One half screaming, don't. This is your boss. This is your career. The other half whispering, she asked you to come. I looked down at the numbers printed on the card. 1104. And I realized with a sick, thrilling certainty. This was the moment the story stopped being about what I imagined, and became about what she would finally admit. Room 1104 wasn't just a number anymore. It was a dare. It was a promise. It was the truth Seraphine Vale had been holding in her mouth for months, careful not to let it slip in the wrong place, in the wrong building, in the wrong moment. I remember the hallway outside her door. The carpet muffling my steps. The quiet so deep it made my breathing sound loud. My hand shook when I lifted it to knock, and I hated that it shook, because I wasn't a fragile person. But I was fragile around her. I knocked once. Then again, softer. The door opened almost immediately, like she'd been waiting close enough to hear my hesitation. Seraphine stood there in a dark blouse and tailored slacks, her hair pulled back, her face composed in that familiar way the whole world feared and adored. But her eyes weren't for the whole world tonight. They were for me. "Miss Hart," she said, calm as always. "Miss Vale," I replied, and my voice betrayed me by sounding like I'd run up the stairs. She stepped aside. No words. Just an invitation. I walked in. The suite was quiet and immaculate, hotel perfect. Curtains half drawn, the city lit up beyond the glass like a field of stars. A single file lay untouched on the desk, as if she'd meant to work and decided she couldn't. There was a glass of water on the table, a jacket draped neatly over a chair. Everything in the room looked controlled. Except the air. The air felt charged. Like it had been waiting too. Seraphine closed the door behind me. The click was soft, but it sounded final anyway. She didn't tell me to stand like a subordinate. Instead, she gestured toward the sofa with a small movement of her hand. "Sit," she said. Not an order. Not a command. Almost gentle. I sat, hands clasped tightly in my lap so she wouldn't see them tremble. She stayed still for a moment, watching me with that unreadable face, like she was deciding where to begin. Then she moved, unhurried, toward the window. She stood with her back half-turned, looking out at New York like it was a courtroom she'd already won. When she spoke, her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it in the office. "You asked me for the truth," she said. "Yes," I whispered. A pause. And then she said, almost thoughtfully, "Do you know what I noticed first?" I didn't answer because I couldn't. My throat had tightened around every word I owned. Seraphine turned her head slightly, not quite looking at me, more like looking at the idea of me reflected in the glass. "Not your work," she said softly. "Your work was fine." My heart stuttered. "It was the way you looked at me," she continued, and the room seemed to lean closer. "The first week you were assigned to me, you tried very hard to be professional." I swallowed. Heat rose in my cheeks. "But your eyes," she said, still calm, still controlled, did not know how to lie. My stomach flipped. I'd spent my whole life believing I was careful. And in one sentence, she told me she'd seen right through me from the beginning. "That's why I moved you," she said. I blinked, shocked. "Because I looked at you?" Seraphine finally turned a little more, the city lights catching the clean lines of her face. "Because I couldn't decide what was more dangerous," she said, "your lack of subtlety or my lack of immunity." My breath caught in my chest and stayed there. She wasn't flirting. She wasn't teasing. She was confessing like she had nowhere left to hide the truth. "In my office," she said, "I am expected to be precise. Unaffected. I do not allow myself indulgences." She let the words sit for a beat, then added, very quietly, "And you felt like an indulgence." My hands tightened together until my knuckles ached. She walked a little closer to the sofa, still not close enough to touch me, but close enough that her presence filled the space between my ribs. "I needed you farther away," she said, "so I could do my job without wanting to watch you do yours." I stared up at her, heart hammering, and for once her mask didn't feel cruel. It felt like effort. Like restraint was a choice she made every day. And the meetings I managed. The chair. Her mouth softened, not into a smile, not quite, but into something less sharp. "You sat where my assistant sits," she said simply. "Just after the head seat." I nodded, remembering the moment she'd stopped and looked at that chair like it belonged to another life. "So I stopped sitting at the head," she continued. Because if I sat there, my eyes would go to you too often. My voice came out tiny. You could have just ignored me. Seraphine's gaze settled on mine fully now, and my whole body went still. I tried, she said. The words were so plain they hurt. Then she turned back to the window as if she needed the glass to steady her. The nightly briefings, she said, were supposed to be procedural. I waited. I didn't know I liked your voice, she admitted, until I was hearing it from a different part of the world. You would speak and it didn't feel like a report. My chest tightened. It felt like a room I could step into, she said, so softly I barely heard it. A room where I didn't have to be Seraphine Vale for a minute. My eyes burned, and I hated myself for it. Then she said, almost as if she were annoyed by her own honesty, that night my camera was off. I wasn't busy. My pulse jumped. I turned it off, she said, because I wanted to look at you without feeling guilty for looking. I let out a breath that sounded shaky. And yes, she added, I missed parts of the meeting. I couldn't help it. Because you weren't listening. Seraphine's eyes flicked to me sharp, but not angry. Because I was watching you, she corrected. My face went hot. And I could have asked anyone else to brief me, she said, voice steady again. I could have asked my PA. I could have asked for the recording. I could have demanded written updates. She paused. But I wanted to hear you tell me yourself. The words landed like a hand placed carefully over my heart. I swallowed. The midnight calls. Seraphine didn't pretend. Most of the time, she said, the file was an excuse. I stopped breathing. I wanted to hear your voice when you were half asleep, she admitted, and something in her tone turned almost tender. It's different then. Softer. Unguarded. A quiet beat. And, she continued, I wanted to know if you were alone. My body went cold and warm at the same time. I stared at her, mind spinning. So when I joked about my ex, I asked about your schedule, she said simply, because I didn't like the idea of someone else having access to you that I didn't. It wasn't possessive the way it could have been. It was honest. Almost vulnerable. Then my throat tightened around the question I hadn't dared ask directly. And the video call? Seraphine went still. Not stiff. Just controlled, like she was holding something very carefully in her hands. I wasn't supposed to answer, she said. I nodded, barely. I answered, she admitted, because I wanted to. My heart slammed once. And when I did, she continued, eyes steady, I saw you. Not, I saw your body. Just you. The way she said it made my stomach drop in the sweetest, most terrifying way. I saw your surprise, she said quietly. Your panic. The way you tried to disappear in real time. My fingers tightened together. And I should have ended the call, she said. I know. I waited, barely breathing. But I didn't, she said, voice low. Because for those seconds, you weren't a junior associate. You weren't a mistake HR could reassign. Her eyes held mine. You were just you, she finished. And I didn't want to look away. My chest ached. I whispered, and you remember it. Seraphine's gaze didn't flicker. I remember the way you looked at me, she said. I blinked. Not the screen, she clarified, voice almost gentle. You. My throat tightened hard. I remember your eyes widening when you realized what you'd done, she said. I remember the way your voice sounded when you apologized, like you were afraid I would ruin you. A beat. And I remember wanting, she said, to tell you that you were safe. I stopped breathing completely. Seraphine took a small step closer, close enough that if I lifted my hand, I could touch her. I didn't. I am telling you all of this, she said, because you asked for the truth. Her eyes searched mine with a kind of careful intensity. Not because I expect anything from you, she added. Not because you owe me anything. Then she looked away, just briefly, like even she couldn't hold that honesty for too long. And when she spoke again, her voice was steadier. Now go to your room, she said. My heart cracked. We leave in the morning. I stared up at her from the sofa, frozen. Because she'd just handed me the most breathtaking confession I'd ever heard. And then tried to send me away like it was nothing. Like I could walk out of that room with my heart still inside my chest. After everything she'd said, after she stood by that window and confessed like it cost her something, she looked at me with that same calm face and tried to wrap it up like a meeting. Now go to your room. We leave in the morning. Like I could just walk away. Like my body wasn't humming with the sound of her honesty. Like my chest wasn't full of the kind of hope that makes you reckless. I didn't move. At first, I think she thought I would. Because that's what people usually do around Seraphine Vale. They obey. They leave. They don't argue with the ice. But I stayed seated on the edge of her sofa, hands clenched together so tightly they hurt, staring at the carpet like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. And when I finally looked up, she was watching me. Not coldly. Not kindly. Just intently. As if she was waiting to see who I would be. My voice came out quieter than I expected. "You don't get to say all that," I said, and then send me away. For a second, something flashed across her face, so small it would have been invisible to anyone who didn't know how to read storms. A pause. A tightening. A breath she didn't want to take. She didn't speak. So I stood. My knees felt weak, but I stood anyway. And I took a step closer. "I can go," I said, because I needed her to understand I wasn't trapped here, but only if that's what you actually want. Seraphine's eyes darkened slightly. I swallowed, then added the one line that made my own heart nearly jump out of my chest. "Or, do you want me to go to my room and call you on video from there?" She didn't blink. She didn't look away. She just held my gaze like she was weighing me in her hands. The silence stretched so long my nerves started to scream. Then she spoke, voice low, controlled, dangerous in its calm. "You asked for the truth," she said. "I did," I whispered. "If you are going to act on what I told you," she continued, "don't do it now." My breath caught. She moved slowly to the side table and set her water down like she needed her hands free to keep control of herself. "I have noticed you for months," she said, not looking at me for a moment. "And I have held it in." My pulse pounded. I couldn't decide whether to feel vindicated or terrified. "If you stay here tonight," she added softly, "I don't think I can." The honesty in that sentence hit me like a wave. She turned then, fully, and her eyes pinned me in place. "I want to be careful with you," she said. My throat tightened around her name. "Sarah." She cut through it gently, but firmly. "Do you even want anything," she asked, in that manner, "to do with me?" The question wasn't arrogant. It was careful. Like she was offering me a choice, fully aware she was offering me power. My chest ached. I nodded once, because I didn't trust my voice. Then I forced the words out anyway. "You know I do." Seraphine held my gaze for a long, quiet moment. And in that moment, she didn't look like a legend, or a headline, or an ice queen. She looked like a woman who had been alone in control for too long. Then she spoke again, and her voice sounded like a decision. "Then I will take you to dinner," she said. "Friday night, when we're back in the city." My heart jumped. "I will not rush you," she added. "I have waited a year. I can wait one more month." I blinked. 1 month. A faint shift, almost amusement, touched her mouth and disappeared. "If I kiss you the way I want to right now," she said quietly, "it will not end at a kiss." My breath caught. "And I am trying," she continued, voice steady, "not to be careless with you." She paused, as if choosing words that wouldn't frighten me. "I am asking you," she said, "to give me 1 month. To let me restrain myself. To let me do this, correctly." My skin prickled. "And tonight," she added, "we do not sleep in the same room." My mouth went dry. It should have sounded like rejection. It didn't. It sounded like she was fighting herself for me. I stared at her for a beat, then exhaled a shaky laugh that wasn't really laughter. "You're punishing yourself," I said. Her eyes didn't move. "And if you punish yourself," I continued, voice stronger now, "you punish me too." That got her attention in a sharper way. A flicker in her gaze. So I took the risk. I stepped closer, close enough that the air between us felt like it had weight. "Fine," I said softly. 1 month. Her shoulders loosened a fraction, like she hadn't known she was holding her breath. "But," I added, "I'm adding to your rule." Seraphine's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Go on." I swallowed. "For that 1 month, 3 nights out of 4, we have dinner together." Silence. I pushed through it. "You take me to your house," I said, voice low, honest, terrifying. "We talk. We watch a movie if we can pretend to focus. And then, when you think I should sleep, you drive me home. I watched her face for reaction, for outrage, for refusal. What I saw instead was restraint tightening again, like my terms were worse than hers. Torture, she said quietly. I nodded. Yes. Another pause. Then Seraphine Vale, who had never once let anyone negotiate with her like this, gave the smallest nod. Accepted, she said. The word hit me like a kiss all by itself. I should have walked out then. I should have said goodnight and fled before my courage evaporated. But my body didn't want distance anymore. It wanted proof. So I took one more step, stopping just short of her. Close enough that my breath could have touched her if I let it. And Friday, I whispered, dinner. Seraphine's gaze dropped, just briefly, to my mouth, then returned to my eyes. Friday, she confirmed. And then, like she was saving both of us, she stepped back and opened the door for me. I walked out into the hallway on legs that didn't feel like mine, my heart pounding with a new kind of pain. The pain of having what you want scheduled. 1 month of dinners. 1 month of restraint. 1 month of wanting. And somehow, it felt worse than the waiting I'd already done. Because now it was real. So, we had a deal. 1 month. And if you've ever tried to be near someone you want, someone you're not allowed to want, then you already know the truth. A month isn't long. It's endless. The first Friday back in the city, she took me to dinner like it was a court appearance. Not stiff. Not cold. Just deliberate. Seraphine Vale arrived at the restaurant exactly on time. She chose a table in the quietest corner. She ordered wine without asking what I liked, and somehow she got it right anyway, something deep and smooth that warmed my chest on the first sip. She didn't flirt. She didn't try to charm me. She just watched me, calm and intent, like she was collecting facts. I talked too much because I was nervous. I over-explained a story about work, and she listened like it mattered. Then she asked one question, and it wasn't about the firm, or the cases, or anything that could be written into an email. What do you do, she asked, when you're not working? I blinked like the question was a trap. Because no one had ever asked me that in her world. Not seriously. I answered anyway. I told her about books I pretended I had time to read. About how I liked walking in the city when it was too late for everyone else. About food. About places I wanted to see someday when my life felt less like a calendar invite. And Seraphine actually let the silence breathe. Then she said quietly, I sent you that list. My heart jumped. I saw. Did you save it? She asked. I swallowed. Yes. She nodded once, like that mattered. Like she'd wanted it to matter. That was the first night. 3 nights out of 4, she kept her promise. Sometimes dinner was a restaurant, dim lighting, white tablecloths, her hand steady around a wine glass. Sometimes it was takeout at her house, eaten from real plates, because Seraphine Vale apparently couldn't tolerate paper containers in her kitchen. She took me to her home like it was the most normal thing in the world. A penthouse with too much glass and too much quiet. A place designed for control. And then she'd do things that made me forget I was dealing with an ice queen. She'd loosen her hair as soon as the door closed behind us. She'd kick off her heels like she didn't need to impress anyone inside these walls. She'd hand me a blanket without comment when she noticed I'd started curling into myself on the couch. We watched movies we barely watched. Because the real story was in the inches between us. The space where our knees almost touched. The space where her shoulder would brush mine when she reached for the remote. The space where I'd catch her looking at my mouth so fast I'd doubt it, then looking away like she hadn't. And always, at the end of the night, she drove me home. That part was the cruelest. The elevator ride down from her apartment, quiet and thick with everything we weren't doing. The car ride through the city, streetlights sliding over her face like secrets. Her hands on the steering wheel, knuckles pale some nights, like she was holding herself back with force. And me, sitting in the passenger seat, trying to behave like I wasn't falling apart. One night, halfway through the month, I couldn't take it and I asked her softly, "Do you regret it?" Her eyes stayed on the road. "No," she said. Just that. No explanation. No comfort. But her voice was enough. By the third week, the tension stopped being cute. It became physical. A constant awareness. Like my body had started keeping time differently, counting dinners instead of days. Dinner 1. Dinner 2. Dinner 3. The fourth night was always the worst because it felt like withdrawal. And I started realizing something I hadn't expected. Seraphine wasn't just restraining herself. She was teaching me how to be patient too. How to want something without grabbing it too soon. How to let anticipation turn into trust. Then the final week arrived. And suddenly every dinner felt sharpened, like the end of the month was a cliff and we were both walking toward it without admitting it. On the last night, day 31, we had dinner at a place she'd never taken me before. Candlelight. Quiet music. A view of the city that made the world look unreal. She watched me across the table the way she watched witnesses in court. Like she could tell when I was about to lie. I tried to eat. I couldn't. I tried to talk. My voice kept catching. Finally, she set her glass down and said calmly, "You're counting." I blinked. "What?" "The days," she said. "You're counting." I couldn't deny it. My throat tightened. "Yes," I admitted. Something like satisfaction, tiny, controlled, moved behind her eyes. As if she'd been counting too. When she drove me back to her place after dinner, the city felt different outside the windows. Too bright. Too alive. Like it had no idea what was about to happen inside her quiet, glass-walled home. We rode the elevator in silence. When we reached her door, she unlocked it and stepped aside for me to enter like she always did. Only this time, I didn't move. I stayed in the doorway. Seraphine turned slightly, looking at me calm, patient, careful. "My carefulness with you," she said quietly, "won't stop even if I kiss you." My breath caught. "I don't think I would ever forgive myself," she continued, "if I made a mistake with you." The words sounded like fear dressed up as control. Like she was still trying to protect me from something. Maybe from her, maybe from the consequences, maybe from the intensity she kept caged behind that composed face. For a second, I just stared at her. Then I realized something so tender it almost hurt. She was scared. Not of the firm. Not of headlines. Not of losing a case. She was scared of hurting me. And it made me step forward. I closed the distance slowly, so she'd have time to stop me if she wanted to. She didn't. I reached for her waist, just there, just that, my hands warm against the fabric of her blouse. Her body went still, not pulling away, just reacting. Like even she couldn't pretend this wasn't real anymore. I took the key from her hand and turned back to the door. And I locked it. The click sounded like a decision. Seraphine's eyes followed the movement, her expression unreadable but her attention absolute. I turned to face her again, heart pounding so hard it felt like it might break through my ribs. "It's 1 month today," I said. She didn't speak. She just looked at me with those eyes, the eyes that made partners careful and opposing counsel nervous. The eyes that could pull a confession out of someone without raising her voice. Only tonight, they weren't aimed at a witness. They were aimed at me, like she was waiting for permission. So I gave it to her. I stepped close enough to feel the heat of her. And I whispered, steady now, because I couldn't stand the waiting another second. "Kiss me, Sarah." For a moment, she didn't move. And that moment was everything. Then her hand came up, slow and certain, fingers brushing my jaw like she was memorizing. Her gaze dropped to my mouth like she'd been starving. And she kissed me. Not rushed. Not gentle. Controlled at first, like she was still trying to keep her promise. But it didn't stay controlled. Because the second her lips met mine, a year of restraint cracked open between us. I made a sound I didn't recognize as mine. Her breath hitched quiet, almost angry, like she'd been fighting this for too long. And I felt the exact second she stopped pretending she could keep distance inside her own house. Her hand tightened at my waist. Mine gripped her blouse like I needed proof she was real. The kiss deepened, slow and consuming, like she was learning me and claiming me in the same breath. And just as the air shifted, just as the kiss started to become something else, something that made my knees weaken, I pulled back just enough to breathe. And Seraphine rested her forehead against mine, eyes closed for one beat, like she was trying to remember how to be careful while wanting everything. That's where I'm going to stop. Because you and I both know what happens when a month of restraint finally breaks. And if you want the rest, if you want what happened after that door locked, after that kiss turned from breathtaking to undeniable, then the uncensored chapters are waiting for you on my Patreon. Link in the description. Same story. Same us. Just nothing held back. I'll see you there.